Hi, my name is Scott Burgess. Welcome to another edition of our Eat and Drink Real Estate Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Luis Ortiz. Luis, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad we could have you out here today.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, maybe how you got started in the business, what kind of got you focused into real estate, and kind of how you got into this whole thing.
Yeah, of course. So, real estate actually wasn't what I planned on doing my whole life. It wasn't my plan A. It wasn't my first option. It kind of just ended up just happening. But what led up to that were a series of events, starting with about a year before I made that decision. I was going through a very difficult moment in my life where the initial career that I actually chose, the career path that I had chosen, wasn't really going according to plan. It wasn't really building up to what I thought it was going to be. And unfortunately, I had to accept that one moment, it's not going to be the right fit for me.
Sure.
So I took that very hard. Took me some time to actually start thinking about what else I could do. So I was just stuck in that. I was working a full-time job at an Amazon warehouse at the time.
Oh, wow.
And then I was also doing side jobs with family and friends, anywhere from, HVAC to demos to, flipping homes, just giving an extra hand. And that kind of put me back into an environment that I was very familiar with, because ever since I can remember, when I was little, I would go to work with my dad, and a lot of my summer breaks weren't really summer breaks because I spent a lot of the time I spent it working with my dad. He's always been in construction. So I was working with him a lot. So I'm doing these side jobs, and I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe a career in construction could be something I can pursue. I know a little bit about it. I've been around it. So that kind of got the wheels going and got the wheels spinning in my head. Sure. And so I started digging a little deeper. I started asking myself, well, what else do I really like? What else would I want to do? Because ideally, I wanted a career where I could wake up and be excited to do whatever it is that career was going to be. I didn't want to wake up, and have to dread going out to the work day. And I didn't want to see it as a job. Yeah. I wanted to do something I was passionate about. And so I started asking myself, well, I love numbers. I love speaking to people. I love meeting new people. And I love helping people. I love being an advocate to people. And so when I mixed that with, being around construction at the time, doing those side jobs and kind of just trying to aim at something, because at some point I wasn't aiming at anything. And so I had to aim at something and go after it and give it my all, right? So one day I called up my dad and I said, hey, can I speak to your real estate agent? So I called him and I kind of let him know, hey, I'm looking to become possibly a real estate agent. Can you tell me a little bit more about real estate? What should I expect? And he actually redirected me to another agent by the name of Rafael Alvarado. Mm-hmm. So I remember it perfectly. I was outside my little sister's school. I was picking her up from school that day, called up Rafael. We had about a 1 hour long conversation on the phone. And man, he really, because it takes time, I can't really go into detail of what the conversation entailed. But Rafael, you can imagine how that conversation went. He was very enthusiastic, very excited for me, and he never knew me, which meant a lot to me of how just to see how much it meant to him that somebody was calling him to ask for this advice, right?
Yeah, supportive.
So, yeah, definitely. So I got home that very same day, and as soon as we hung up, the first thing I did is I looked up classes and I registered for a class immediately.
Oh, wow.
I registered, took my class, got my passed the exam. I got my license. I had already interviewed a few brokerages, and I decided to go with Shield Real Estate with Rafael Alvarado. And so that's kind of how it came to be. But it's funny how it worked out because, like I said, it wasn't what I wanted to do since the beginning. It just kind of came
but
to
you've
be.
been around it. You kind of had a feel for what goes on, kind of on the cursory there, and just dip the toe in and start going, man.
Right, yeah, no, most definitely. And well, here I am. I mean, I love it. I love what I do 100%.
Fantastic. So speaking of real estate, do you kind of have an idea of, when's the best time to buy? When's the best time to sell? Do you have kind of a framework for that? What are you thinking there?
Yeah, so to buy, well, let's start with sell first, actually.
Sure.
The best time to sell, in my opinion, is either in the spring market or in the summer market. And what's going to dictate which one is going to be best for you, it's all going to depend on your personal situation. Okay. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you have a family, you have kids who are in school, obviously selling a home means that you're going to buy a home eventually. So you're going to have to be moving, right? So moving and transitioning from one house to another to a whole different neighborhood community while your kid is in school can be a little bit stressful, not only for you, your family, but for the kids as well.
Sure.
So I definitely
Yeah.
recommend waiting till the summer, listing your home in the summer to get all that done. Make sure that you can get into another home before the school season starts back up in the fall, right?
Yeah.
Now you can also test the waters in the spring. Spring market is one of the best markets here in Chicago, and so I feel like testing the waters in the spring can also be very beneficial towards you. Kind of lets you see maybe once the summer comes around, what would be a good listing price if you even want to sell at all.
Mhm.
So that's for selling, and for buying, in my personal opinion, the best time to buy is right now. And what I mean by that
Yep.
is literally right now, but not literally right now. So once again, everybody's situation is different, right? Everybody goes on it's a case by case kind of situation. And so whenever you ask that question or somebody asks you that question, whether it was a month ago, whether it was today, whether it's in a month from now, my answer is always right now. In that literal moment, right now is the best time to buy. And 99% of the people that ask me that question are people that are more so waiting for interest rates to drop.
Okay.
A lot of people
Yeah.
are usually, when is the best time? When are interest rates going to drop? Because every time they ask me when is the best time to buy, that's usually followed up by when are the interest rates going to drop?
Yeah.
When should I be ready for that?
Trying to
And
time it perfectly, right?
Exactly. And it's understandable. A lot of people really do care about the interest rate, 100% understandable. But this is the way I see it. If you have a home, you absolutely love, it's for example, it's $250,000 for that home, and the interest rate is at an 8%, and you don't really like that, or a high interest rate, right? You're not really into that interest rate. You want to wait for that interest rate to drop. You are not the only person that thinks that way. There are a lot of other people out there, hundreds of thousands of people out there that think that same way. They are also waiting for the interest rate to drop.
Sure.
So once that interest rate drops, at that point it's just 101 economics, supply and demand. The price always follows demand. So the demand is going to go up. Everybody's going to want to buy because the interest rate just went down. So that property that you were in love with that was once at 250 could possibly now be at 260, 270, or you could even overpay for it because now there are multiple offers.
Yeah.
So now you get into a bidding war, and now which is good for the seller, but as a buyer now you're paying a lot more for a property. And so I always suggest, if the interest rate is really that important to you, buy now. And then when the interest rate does drop, you can always just refinance and get that lower interest rate.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's good advice. So when you're talking about buying and selling, one question that always comes up no matter where you're looking is, hey, if I'm renting right now, is it better for me to keep renting or should I buy? Do you kind of have an answer for that if people ask you that?
Yes, most definitely. Once again, it is a lot of people ask me that question. Should I keep renting or should I buy? And my answer to all of those people, believe it or not, is never the same. It's always
Really?
different. Yes,
Okay.
because everybody is at a different position in their life, at a different point in time of their life. There are people that maybe can afford to buy a home. Some people can't. And sometimes you have to do what you have to do for your family. I mean, you need a roof over your head.
Sure.
I've rented before, so I'm not against renting at all.
Yeah.
But if you do have the means to buy a property, I definitely do suggest to buy a property. So whenever somebody asks me that question, I kind of answer it by asking them 3 questions. The first question I ask them, to me, the most important is, where do you stand financially at the moment?
Mhm.
Do you have enough money for a down payment? Do you have enough money for closing costs, inspections, appraisals?
Mhm.
Is that something that you're able to do? And a lot of people don't really have a stable income or that amount of money to go ahead and buy that property.
Sure.
And so renting is the only option that they have.
Okay.
Second question I ask them is location. Where you're living at the moment, or where you see yourself living in the future, where you want to build your family, is there a certain place or area that you like, that you see yourself living there for 5+ years?
Okay.
If you do, then I strongly suggest you buy a property because you see yourself living there. Now, if you're somebody that maybe your job requires you to go from place to place, or you like to move from area to area,
Yeah.
then definitely renting is something much more flexible in that kind of scenario for you. The third question I ask them is, are they ready to assume all of the responsibilities that come with home ownership? Because a lot of people might have the money, They might like the area, but they just want to continue to rent because they don't want to put up with maintenance. They don't want to put up with property taxes.
Yeah.
Something messes up in their house or something, they can just call the landlord, have them fix it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't really want to deal with a lot of that, a lot of those responsibilities that come with home ownership. So usually like I said, when somebody asks me that question, I ask them those 3 questions.
Yep.
After those 3 questions, they have a much more clear idea of whether or not they should buy or if they should keep renting.
Is it kind of self-evident once they answer those 3 questions? They kind of feel like, yeah, I think I've answered my own question, sort of.
Yes, and it's
Okay.
a very interesting conversation. It's actually kind of like a fun conversation that I have with them, because in the beginning when they ask me, they're kind of at a point where they have no idea what they want to do. That's why they're asking me that, and so I ask them those 3 simple questions, and even by the first question, but 99% of the time, by the end of the 3rd question, they're like, oh wow, wait. They kind of reflect on the conversation we just had, and they're like, I know what I want now. So that has definitely helped me a whole lot whenever people ask me whether or not they should go buy or keep renting.
Yeah, kind of help walk them through that process. Maybe there's things they haven't, thought about as far as like, oh, ownership means this.
Correct.
So you're helping them. So speaking of whether or not we should rent or buy, we've decided we can buy. How does somebody go about qualifying and finding out, okay, here's really what you can afford, we'll say?
Right. So there are a few ways to do that, but one of the easiest ways to do that is you kind of take this formula that the bank uses, right, to kind of look at your income, but not only your income, but your debt.
Yeah.
Because you can make a lot of people think, well, I need to make a whole lot of money to buy a house, but not really that. A lot of what that entails, if whether or not you can qualify to even buy a house, is how much debt you have.
Yeah.
You can make 6 figures a year, but if your debt is out the roof, then you're not going to qualify for that loan.
Yeah.
And so what that looks like, it's very simple. You basically just take your gross income, you divide that by 12 to get your monthly income.
Yep.
And then depending if you're going to use a conventional or FHA, it determines up to how much debt you can have on a month-to-month basis, that helps you determine the debt to income ratio, is what the lenders call it.
Okay.
And so basically you take 50, with conventional it's 50% of debt and FHA is 55%. Let's say you're going FHA, once you have that monthly income, you find that 55% number for your monthly income, and that will let you know up to how much debt you can have.
Okay.
Now, obviously, if you have a car loan, credit cards that you're paying on a month-to-month basis, you add that up, and it'll give you an idea of up to how much of a mortgage you can afford, or even if you can even afford a mortgage at all.
Yeah.
So that is a very quick way to kind of, get the ball rolling and see, well, can I even afford to get into buy a property right now?
Kind of figure it backwards. Hey, here's all my debt, and add a payment. Here's the maximum the payment can be.
Exactly.
That'll help you determine, hey, maybe you got to put a little more down than you thought, and that may, kind of steer them down a different path. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct.
Of that?
No, yeah, correct.
Okay.
100%.
So if we're talking about qualification with say first-time home buyers, do you kind of see like the biggest mistake they make, or typically first-time home buyers, here's something they do that you should really avoid? Is there anything like that you come across?
Yes. The biggest mistake for first-time home buyers is definitely shopping before getting your pre-approval.
Okay. What do you mean by shopping? Shopping the house?
By
Or
shopping,
shopping the lender?
So shopping, what I mean by that is going around and already starting to look at certain areas, certain types of homes, and the reason why that's such a big mistake before getting your pre-approval is because you start to fall in love with certain things, like a certain area, a certain neighborhood, or a certain type of home that you would like. Even sometimes a specific home that you fall in love with that you come across.
Yeah.
And so, let's say that house is $300,000, and then you get your pre-approval, and you only get pre-approved for $250,000. Okay. Now you spend a lot of time. You kind of start in a negative way where you're already let down by the fact that now you can't go towards what you were really getting excited about. Mm-hmm. And so I always encourage people to, before they start shopping, to always get their pre-approval. It gives them a better idea of where to look and what they can obtain.
Yeah,
and it gives them,
keep them in the right place as far as we'll say your guidelines or your parameters as far as this is the dollar amount. Now you can go find different neighborhoods that maybe qualify for that dollar amount, but
Correct.
Don't start looking at things that, obviously you're going to want the marble drive, pathways in the front and have all your lighted trees and all this goofy
Right.
stuff. And maybe, like you said, that's not in the cards for you. And so it might be a letdown. So right, you're trying to avoid that kind of negative first impression with the whole process. Then they come to you, they're all upset and like, You know,
Exactly.
how do we get around this? You know, that kind of thing.
Yes, and so that definitely sucks because they're not even, you know, they're in the very early stages of the home buying process and they're already let down.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest mistakes I've seen with first time home buyers.
So if people are doing that, so let's say everybody takes your advice and they start looking at a lender first, shopping around, maybe with some realistic expectations. Is there something you try to do to help folks? We'll call it a process, right? It's not a static event where it's just, hey, got pre-approved, boom, closed on a house. It's kind of a whole process. Is there a way you take people through that to kind of keep them at ease and kind of keep them calm? Because sometimes we all hear about nightmare stories where things get out of hand, spiral quick. Is there something you try to do with them throughout that whole process? Is there something you do specifically with your buyers?
Yes, most definitely. To me, it starts right in the beginning. As soon as I get to meet them, I always encourage my clients to have a consultation with me before anything, because I just set the bar for them. I'm 100% honest with them, and I let them know the step-by-step process of the home buying process.
Yeah.
Let them know what to expect, all the paperwork that entails into that, everything that we're going to go through, potential setbacks, kind of just giving them the reality of what it is to buy a home. It's not just go get your pre-approval, let's make an offer, let's buy it. There's a lot more that goes into that. And so right off the bat, I let them know, hey, this is what it's going to look like. So, you know, that way when we're halfway through the process or something comes up, that way it's not unexpected. It's something that I already prepped them for.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's one way. And another way that I do that is I try to build a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I'm not just there to provide a sale, I'm there to provide a service.
Okay.
And so providing a service for them is very important to me because I like to build that relationship so they can feel comfortable with me throughout the process.
Okay.
You know, they're going to be meeting with me, you know, seeing houses, phone calls at the closing, at the inspections. They're going to be seeing a whole lot of me in the next, 30 to 60 days. And so building that relationship with them is definitely key. It allows them, not only the buyer, but the buyer's family. So if they have kids or a partner or a spouse, I definitely like to build a relationship with them as well so they can feel comfortable with me, kind of, you know, allow them to feel like they can trust me as well. So I set that up. I start building that with them from the get-go.
Okay.
While we're going through the process, another thing that I do to help them, you know, alleviate a lot of that stress or kind of avoid or prevent, you know, them burning out, getting overwhelmed, is I try to take things one step at a time. Always go through one phase at a time. If we're looking at houses, I don't try to get ahead of myself or let them get ahead of themselves into the next steps. I always do just one step at a time, allowing them to fully focus on that one step, and then we move on to the next step. Because it can get a little bit chaotic where there are so many things going on at once. Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, a lot of these buyers, they have families, they have full-time jobs.
Sure.
They work 40 plus hours a week. They probably have extracurricular activities with their kids, whether it's sports or music or whatever the case may be. And so if I can do something to help them go through this process a little bit easier, a little bit smoother, then I definitely go 100% in and I'm there for them. Once again, it's just more than a sale. I try to provide that service for them.
Trying to keep it in like bite-sized chunks, essentially. Tackle this, if there's an issue or a problem, like you said, let's tackle that first. Let's get that done. Sideline that now that it's fixed or worked through. Move on to the next phase, right? Instead of jumping ahead and like, hey, here's all these things you're going to do down the road. May feel like they're overwhelmed or something, like, oh my gosh, I'm out.
Right.
Like there's too much to do. So with all this, I mean, it sounds like you got a pretty solid process where they're going through, you're talking about how to get through this. Does it kind of, if you were to step back, do you have sort of like an overarching like strategy or an investment kind of philosophy on what you're trying to look for? Once somebody's come to you and you guys have talked about what they can afford, is there any other conversation you have with folks about maybe a philosophy or a strategy for this kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I kind of express to them, or should I say, I kind of, depending on the person itself, since I already know what they're looking for, since they've already told me a little bit of what their goals are, I take that and then I obviously give them my best opinion. For example, one of my favorite investment strategies is the BRRRR method. But obviously for
Oh, yeah.
BRRRR method, it's more so for experienced investors, people that have maybe done some type of investment in real estate that kind of know the ropes a little bit. So I kind of explained the BRRRR method to them.
What is the BRRRR method?
I
know we talked about it before.
I'm glad you asked. I actually just shot a video. And I am going to upload it. It goes more into the step-by-step of what that is. I'll be posting that soon. But basically what the BRRRR method is a method where you get to buy a property and you get to keep the property, and it reaps a lot of benefits. So you buy the property. There's the first letter of the BRRRR method, which is BRRRR, 4 R's.
Okay.
The first letter being B, so you buy. Second letter is, the first R is you rehab. So you rehab the property. After you rehab the property, you want to go ahead and rent out the property.
Okay.
And then once you have it rented out, you're getting some rental income, then you can go ahead and refinance that property.
Okay.
Once you get that cash out refi or any kind of other refi that you would like to do, you take out that refi, that money, and then you reinvest it. You basically repeat the process, and you get another property. And so the reason why I like that method is because you get to keep the property. I mean, you can sell the property and collect the check, call it a day, which is great as well. You can flip homes, another great thing to do in real estate.
Sure.
But the reason why I really love this strategy is because you can keep the property, creating passive income for yourself, and you get to do it again. Once again, you can scale your real estate portfolio at a much larger rate or a much faster rate than flipping the houses, which I'm not against, but the BRRRR method is definitely.
So yeah, they're getting into these properties, they're rehabbing them, right? They're going to rent them out, and then what you're trying to help them understand is, hey, pay yourself back.
Right.
You don't necessarily need to sell the property, but if they can stick with you,
right,
pay themselves back, then like you said, reinvest, move on to the next one. Now we got 2 properties, then 3, then 4.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then when it comes to first-time investors, or first-time homebuyers even, I talk to them a little bit about house hacking. So you can
house hacking.
Yes,
what?
correct.
Okay.
Yes. So for example, with FHA, you can get a multi-unit up to 4 units.
Yeah.
So how awesome is it that you can buy a property for as low as 3.5% down? You get a 4-unit property. You move into one of the units and you rent out the other 3. And while you're renting out the other 3 are essentially paying off the mortgage, so you can live in one of the units for free.
Yeah.
So you're house hacking in that sense. So then maybe in a year or 2, since you've been living for free, you can really save up your money, work really hard. And now at that point, now you can even, maybe you want to settle down, you want to build a family, your family's growing. So now you want to buy a house, and now you have an investment property under your belt, which in the eyes of a lender is amazing. It's great. They can use that additional income to your already income.
Help you qualify.
Yes, exactly. And so definitely those are two of the investment strategies that I really like.
Well, it sounds interesting. So now we've been talking a lot about buyers, right? So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. Sellers, I know, you and I had a couple conversations about this before. Listing agents. Is there a philosophy you kind of have with listing agents? Is there things that you like to talk about, or maybe talk with other listing agents like, hey, here's some things you should consider, essentially? Remember we were talking about that? What kind of things do you like to help listing agents with?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the first things that I think is very, very important to know when you're working with a seller, when it comes to accepting offers, or your seller's trying to debate between one offer and the other, or it could even just be one offer itself, I always strongly recommend calling the lender, the buyer's lender. Introduce yourself and, kind of ask some questions to see just how strong that buyer is. Obviously, you can't start asking for financials and specific numbers, right? But you can kind of ask them questions to get an idea of their buyer. And the reason why I think that's very important, very early on in my career, something that happened to me, which is why I do this now, is we accepted an offer. It was between 2 offers. The seller couldn't decide. And so they ended up choosing one. And the offer that we went with, about a week into us being under contract, the lender contacted me and said, hey, this buyer is actually going to need seller credits. I just looked at their file, I ran across this, and they actually need seller credits if they want to buy this property. And so luckily I was able to negotiate it to where they did get the credits on top of the asking price. So my seller still netted the amount that they were asking for.
Okay.
But it could have easily been a situation where the deal could have fallen apart.
Sure.
And then maybe if we went to the other offer, maybe they decided to go with a different property. So definitely encourage to call the lenders, introduce yourselves, and ask about their buyers. See just how strong their buyers are. Just making sure that your client is selecting a good offer.
Yeah, that pre-approval they got, you kind of talk to that loan officer or that lender and kind of get an idea of, yeah, this is strong. They've looked at it. It seems like we're going down the right path. I'm sure you get kind of your spidey sense goes off like, yeah, I think we're on the right track, or hey, man, we might have a problem here.
Right.
Is that a fair assessment? Are these guys, are lenders pretty receptive to that? I mean, they're not like telling you, hey, don't bother me, don't bug me, but are they open to at least talking in a general sense about their buyer? Is that okay?
For the most part, they are. Okay. For the most part, so as long as, once again, as you don't cross that line of trying to get too personal.
Sure.
Right. Once again, you can ask them for personal information or exact numbers from their buyers.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they are actually willing to work with you, just because obviously, we both want the same thing. We want to help our client, and so they're helping their buyer get this property, and I want my client to sell his property. So it starts to become a thing where we're working together. And so for the most part, they do work with me. They do like to, give me the information that I need. They're not really,
you're there to help them.
Listen,
I want to help your guy get into my seller's house.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So yeah, for the most part, they're very cooperative.
That's good. Is there kind of like people typically overlook a certain area of this whole, because there's a lot of moving parts in this.
Right.
Is there something you've seen or kind of in your experience that like people tend to overlook throughout this whole process? Is there something like that you see?
Actually, one that I was just talking about this with one of my other clients, is you definitely don't want to shy away from seeing properties during a rainy day. A lot of people don't want to see properties on a rainy day, which is understandable. I mean, nobody wants to go out and, get their clothes wet and go from house to house. It can be a little bit overwhelming. But I definitely suggest to definitely take your clients out to see houses either on a rainy day or a day after a big rainy day. Yeah. And the reason why is because the property starts to expose. You can see any type of water penetration, any leakage that you might not see on a hot summer day. And, it's actually happened to me about 3 months ago. I was out looking at properties with a buyer. Yeah. Him and his wife, we walk into this property, and they both immediately fall in love with the property. And the wife fell in love with the kitchen, and you already know if the wife falls in love with the kitchen, then you're most likely going to buy that property.
Yeah.
And so she falls in love with the kitchen. They fall in love with the master bedroom, the living room, everything from the first floor to the second floor. Everything's going great. It looks like this is going to be the one. Yeah. We go into the basement, and as soon as we turn on the light, there is about 6 inches of water just all over the basement. Everything was just flooded down there.
Really?
And so immediately, as soon as they saw that, they just turned right around. We shut all the lights off, walked right out, and kept going on to the next one. And so if you can imagine, on a hot summer day, that doesn't happen, right? We see the property, they fall in love, we make an offer, and we're under contract, and then out of nowhere you see these big issues with the structure or the roof, and now we could have avoided that by going out on such days. So yeah, that's definitely one of the most overlooked things.
Going out and seeing properties in the rain, or as you said, maybe the day after, to kind of get a better feel of like, hey, is this the bones solid of this property?
Yeah, right. And I'm not saying try to
only go when it's raining.
Only go when it's raining, but don't shy away from it. Don't. Yeah. If it is raining, actually be more excited. Be more, this is all. To me, it's the best weather to go look at houses, honestly.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you had a good catch. I mean, you did the right thing with those folks, and it sounds like you averted a possible catastrophe.
Correct.
So what would you say, in light of that, what's the most rewarding thing for you with doing this? When you go and you show either buyers a new property, like you said, they fall in love with it, or sellers, and you bring them multiple offers, like what's the most rewarding thing you get out of all this?
The most rewarding thing, that's a good question, just because as you were asking me that question, there were a bunch of different things going on in my mind. And one of the biggest ones is definitely getting to know a lot of new people.
Okay.
I get to know a lot of agents, loan officers, attorneys, inspectors, insurance agents, people in title, like yourself, the great Scott. And so getting to build all these new relationships, extending my network and all that, it's awesome because I get to, like I said, I get to meet a lot of new people. But another thing that to me is probably even more important to me than that is the impact that I have on these families' lives when I am able to guide them successfully to buying a property. Yeah. Because, I come from a family where, they came to this country with an idea, with a goal, with a dream of providing a better life for me and my siblings, right?
Mhm.
And so when now that I'm grown up and I'm able to guide somebody to do something as similar like my parents did for me,
Mhm.
but I can remember when they got their first home, how excited they were, how happy they were, and so for me to be able to guide someone through that process and have that big of an impact in their lives is just
Yeah.
priceless. So when I get to see them through the process, just how difficult it's been for them, and as I've mentioned earlier, I do build relationships with them. So sometimes I even get to see what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis outside of just buying the house.
Sure.
So to see them close, to see them, when the closer says, we're fully funded, we're all good to go, the smiles on their faces, the kids are so excited.
Yeah.
And so that moment there, just seeing that after all they've been through, after all their hard work to finally be able to get the keys to their home, that to me is probably one of the most rewarding, parts of my job for sure.
That's got to be a great feeling just to see that, not even relief sometimes, but just the joy of home ownership.
Yes.
Or even if they sold a property to maybe move to a dream home they've been waiting on for 10, 15 years, something like that. That's got to feel fantastic,
it's
man.
priceless.
I don't know of anything else that gives you that kind of joy where fortunately enough, you work with a big part of people's lives. I mean, buying a home, right?
It's a huge step in yeah.
Yeah. So that's all the good stuff. All right. Tell me something. Let's get a little off track here. Tell me something. What's the goofiest or the oddest, weirdest thing that's possibly happened to you in this business where just kind of off the beaten path? You got any experiences like that? Anything?
Not necessarily goofy, but something very odd.
Okay.
Something that you don't see every day. I was at a closing. I was working with the seller in this transaction, and we're at the closing. I walk in there. The attorney's already there with the buyers doing his thing.
Okay.
They're signing their documents and everything. And so it's everything's going well. Everything's fine. But then at some point, everyone starts to notice that the buyer's agent isn't there. And so maybe we're maybe he's running late. Maybe, something came up.
Sure.
But, we're all at the same closing table. So it's kind of hard not to hear the conversation that somebody's having right next to you. So the attorney starts to speak with the buyer. And, they start talking about just their experience that they had throughout this whole process. And I guess from what I heard that, the agents just gave them a real hard time. The lender gave them a real hard time. And it was the most stressful process that they've been through. And they were first-time home buyers.
Okay.
So buying your first property is already stressful enough. So to have that kind of service, I mean, I felt real bad for them. And you don't see it every day where the buyer doesn't show up for the buyer's agent doesn't show up for their buyers, especially first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
You want to be with them to the finish.
Yeah, that's success, the final success. I should be there.
And so at first it was maybe, like I said, maybe he's running late, maybe something came up. But I guess through conversation, they let me know that it had been days since they heard from him. They hadn't heard from him in days. He doesn't answer the phone. He doesn't pick up the text.
Wow.
Nothing, right? And so the first thing I do when I hear that and I see that, the wife was very upset, very understandably so. So the first thing I do is I close my laptop, I grab my phone, I look up the nearest convenience store, and I get in my car. I go drive to the convenience store 10 minutes from there, come right back. I grab them a champagne bottle. I got there and I asked them to, step outside of the closing room with me. Yeah. And I kind of just expressed I kind of just let them know how unfortunate it was to see them go through something like that.
Yeah.
Because as somebody that works in that field that really cares about what he does, or what I do, it really matters to me the type of service that you provide for somebody, because as I mentioned earlier, it's not just a sale, it's a service that we're providing. So to see that an agent, did that to them, they were having that kind of day, it definitely motivated, pushed me to want to be there for them. So I gave them the bottle, I congratulated them, and they were honestly ecstatic. They were very happy. Yeah. It kind of flipped their mood because although they were happy, okay, we're buying our house, this is a big day, but they were very upset with how everything was going.
Sure.
And so when they saw that, when I provided that, when I, made that gesture, they absolutely, their whole mood just flipped.
Oh,
they're excited.
It had to be a wave of relief. Or just, hey, man, somebody's here with me.
So I started taking pictures of them. I'm like, hey, let me take a picture of you. This is a big day for you guys. So they were very excited. And then by the end of that, which is something that this wasn't why I was doing it. This was not my intention at all. But it turns out that after that, shortly when, we were finally fully funded, where everybody was saying congratulations to each other, the couple came up to me and they asked me for my card because although this was their first time buying a home, their first property, they were thinking in investing in real estate. So they're like, hey, I really appreciate what you did for me. Can I have your card? I would like to work with you down the line because we do intend in investing down the line. Wow. And that to me was amazing because like I said, it's not like I was expecting that. It's not like I was, going to buy the champagne bottle, expecting them to become a client of mine. It was just the moment of the gesture of I felt like I wanted them to feel like someone was there for them. Someone was there like supporting them through such a big step, So yeah, that was very odd because you don't see it every day where, especially a first-time home buyer is at the closing without his agent, without hearing from the lender. Yeah. So it's something that you don't really see every day.
That's pretty cool, man. When you take the time like that and you take care of the people, it seems like the other stuff, like you said, you weren't planning on going in picking up a new customer today from a buyer.
Exactly.
Who's already been working with, competition, a selling agent, right?
Right.
But it all worked out, man. That's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm glad you came out here and shared your experiences with us today. That's fantastic. What is the easiest way to get a hold of you? If somebody says, Luis is it, I got to work with this guy, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the easiest way to reach out to me is definitely through my phone number. You can either shoot me a text or call me at 708-856-4792. And then you can also find me on Instagram by looking up Luis M_your realtor. And then you can also shoot me an email as well.
And we will have Luis's QR code in the bottom of this whole podcast so you can see it. Nice and easy. Click on it, reach out to him, start working with him. Luis, thank you so much for being here today. True pleasure talking with you, man. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.